I'm now recording as well, so whenever
Great,
you're ready, you can get started.
great. Okay. Everybody see my screen, yes? Everybody see me, yes? Yes? Yeah, good? Okay, I will start. See, yes, great. Amazing. Hi, everyone. If you don't know me, I'm Elad. I'm a CSS HTML architect. It means that I'm a kind of a front-end developer that does only CSS and HTML, and I love this very much. Besides this, I'm writing a lot of articles on CSS that you can find in medium.com in this link, and I'm a community leader of a big community in Israel that's called CSS Master Israel with more than 5,500 members. And I love to talk about CSS in every meetup and every conference. And we are here in this online webinar conference, everything because the coronavirus pandemic. The coronavirus pandemic has disrupted our life in so many ways. Even for me that I needed to talk in two big conferences in Europe, of course, all the conference in all the world has been canceled. And in this situation in life, you maybe can be sad. But from my perspective in life, we don't have time to be sad because life is very, very short, and we always need to think about how we can create a good situation from a bad situation. And this is exactly what I've done when the coronavirus pandemic has started. First, we started to be a lot of time at home. And for me, it's really the first time that I have enough time at home. Usually we are working 5 days a week, in the morning traffic, in the evening traffic, and in the weekend, we just want to rest. Because of that, in the first day, I was rearranging my apartment that I will feel more good to stay at home. I opened my sofa in my living room to a bed that sometimes I can sleep in my living room. And the aquarium that didn't work for 5 years, I put some water and some fishes, and it created a good mood to stay at home. And then came the first weekend in the coronavirus pandemic time that we cannot go out anywhere. And I thought to myself, isn't it the best time to create for myself a project? And I thought what I will do, what I will create. And I remember that 7 years ago, I created a pure CSS game that called Kill the Birds, that a lot of web developers all around the world loved it very much. And I told to myself that in the last 7 years, I learned so many new tricks in CSS that now I can create a even better one. But I needed an idea what it will be about. And it was very easy idea because we are now in the coronavirus pandemic. Why not create a coronavirus game? And this is exactly what I've done. I created the coronavirus game, or more precise, the coronavirus invaders. And everything that you see in this game is pure CSS and HTML. There isn't any single line of JavaScript in all this game. Yes, for the CSS, I'm using the SAS preprocessor. And for the HTML, I'm even using an HTML preprocessor that it's called Pug. But beside of it, there isn't any JavaScript in this game. All the logic, CSS and HTML. For example, if I will press the OMI button, it will open a pop-up. Even this logic is only CSS and HTML. When I will press the close button, it will close the pop-up, and again, pure CSS and HTML. And when I will press the Save the World button, it will close the main navigation and open the game itself, and even this pure CSS and HTML. And when I will click the coronavirus creature, they will be dead, and the score of the game will go up. Even this is pure CSS and HTML. And what about the countdown? Yes, it's too pure CSS logic. And before you create any project that you want, you have to think about inspiration. And inspiration, it doesn't to create nothing, to create everything from nothing. It's to take others' idea that you saw in the past and create from them something new and something else. And the beginning, I needed to create the creature of the coronavirus and didn't know where to start. And I remember that half a year ago, I saw a code pen with a painting on Canvas HTML. And this creature reminded me a little bit the coronavirus creature. And for me, it was a good start to think about how to create a coronavirus creature. And I needed an idea how to call the game and how the main navigation will look, because I'm not a web designer. I'm professional in CSS, but not in design. And I took some idea of this Chicken Invaders game. My game is called the Coronavirus Invaders. Yes, only because this game. And I took some idea of how the main navigation will look. But beside of it, the game is looking very different and it's working very different. And inspiration, as I told you, it's to take some others' idea and create from them something else and something very different. And the first thing that I wanted to do in this game is to create the coronavirus creatures. And it's very nice to see that this was my inspiration. And in the end, I created something very different. And I love it because this is more mine. And then I started to create the HTML of the coronavirus creature. And for me, everything is important. I'm not just putting some HTML and tell it to work. Everything needs to be very readable. I'm writing the HTML like an object-oriented thinking, and everything needs to be very precise. And I started to create the coronavirus creature with label HTML element, and inside there is an input type of radio. Why is that? The label and the input type of radio is part of the logic of the game that we will talk about it later. But then inside, with the class of the body of the coronavirus, I started to create all the visual part of the corona creature, all the 12 hairs, both eyes, and of course the body itself. And from the beginning, I saw that I'm creating a lot of repetition in the HTML that I don't want to repeat myself. All those 12 hairs, and I have in the game 100 coronavirus creature, and you don't want to copy paste all the HTML again and again and again. How can I solve it without using any JavaScript or server-side language? I can use the Pug HTML preprocessor. It's really the first time in my life that I'm using it, and it helped me a lot to not copy paste a lot of HTML parts. And of course, for the CSS, I'm using the SAS preprocessor that I'm using in the last 9 years for every project that I'm doing. And this way, repeating HTML, I can just write them with the Pug HTML preprocessor, and this way I don't need to copy paste parts that are being repeated. We can create variables in Pug, for example, and with the value of 1 that going between the while loop that going between 1 to 12, and printing to the screen the span element with the class of hair, dynamic value, and every iteration, this number is going up between 1 to 12. And writing in Pug preprocessor is very different from writing regular HTML, and you need to get used to it because when you are working with the Pug HTML preprocessor, you cannot write half HTML and half Pug. If you are working with Pug, you have to write everything with the Pug HTML preprocessor. And it means that all the HTML in the game is written with Pug. And yes, you need to get used to it. But if I done this project in 2 days in the weekend and I learned Pug during the project, everybody can. And then I wanted to start to paint all the style of the coronavirus creature. I've started with the body of the coronavirus creature. I gave it a position relative because I want that all the other parts will be according to the body of the coronavirus creature. I gave it a width of 100 pixels and height of 100 pixels, background color black, and that it will be circle. I gave it a border radius of 50%. And then I wanted to create all of the eyes. And because I have 2 HTML elements, one with I1 and one with I2, and I want to select them both together, I'm using here the attribute selector with the star character. And this way it selects me both of the eyes together. And I gave every one of all of the eyes width of 20 pixels, height of 26 pixels, background color white, and border radius of 50%. And because the width and the height is a little bit different, it's getting the egg shape. And then I just located them both from the top, 25%, the left eye from the left, 25%, the transform, little bit rotate Z to the inside of 15 degrees, the second eye from the right 25%, and rotate Z to the inside with minus 15 degrees. And then I wanted to create the inner part of the eyes. I'm using here the before pseudo element. And it's really the same idea. As you can see, it's everything is now circles, circles, and circles. And to create the inner part of the eyes, I gave this element width and height of 8 pixels, background color black, and again, border radius of 50%. But now I wanted to create all those hair of the coronavirus creature. I have 12 HTML elements with class between R1 until R12. This way I can select them all together, and to create those hair, I'm using this two pseudo elements, one the before and one the after pseudo element. The after is the root of there, is the first box, and the second box is the before pseudo element, that is another box, and how it's a little bit circle, again, border radius of 50%. But now I want to locate all the hair according the coronavirus creature on his body. How can I locate it? Located all the hair, I'm using the position absolute and putting all those 12 hair in the center of the coronavirus, here, in the center, in the middle. And for the first hair, I'm using the transform property with a rotate Z value of 0 degrees that doesn't do anything. But then the translate Y of minus 65 pixels, taking the hair from here to here. But the second hair need to be top and little bit to the right. How I'm locating the second hair? For the hair 2, I'm giving the transform property with the value of rotate Z of 30 degree, and only then the translate Y of minus 65 pixels. This way the hair is going from here to here. And if you don't work a lot with the transform property, the order of the value is very important. It means that if I'm writing first the translate Y and then the rotate Z of 30 degrees, it works not the same. It's working a different way. And it's very important when you are working with the transform property is to understand that the order of the value is very important and affect each others. And this way I located all the 12 hairs of the coronavirus creature. Every one of them get a different rotate Z value. And I'm doing here a lot of repetition, and we as the web developers don't like repetition in our code. How can we solve it? We can use the for loop that we have in SAS. First, I'm creating a SAS variable with a start position of 0 degrees. And then I'm creating the for loop that with the SAS variable of I that going between 1 to 12. This way, I'm creating a dynamic class name that going between R1 until R12. And in every rotation, the start position is changing. The first time is getting a 30 degrees, 0 plus 30. The second time it will be 30 plus 30, 60 degrees, and so on and so on. And I'm just putting the start position in the rotate Z value. This for loop create me this CSS. Very nice way to not repeat your code when you are working with SAS. But I wanted that the creature of the coronavirus will feel more alive and won't stuck like this. And I added some animation. First animation, I wanted to create it for all the hair of the coronavirus. But because every hair has a different transform value, it means that I need to create 12 different keyframes. And you don't want to copy paste all those keyframes one by one. We can now create all those 12 keyframes in the same for loop that we created now. And this way I'm creating dynamically 12 keyframes with different names that I'm using here the I SAS variable. But it's still a problem because all the hair, if I'm doing it moving in the same time, and you don't want that they move in the same time, how can we tell that every hair will move in a different timeline? We can use the animation delay value. But if you're giving every hair a different animation delay value, it means that it will, for example, if I will give the first hair 60 milliseconds, the second hair 120 milliseconds, the third hair 180 milliseconds, the hair will first stuck, and only after those milliseconds it will start to move. And you want that all the hair will move from the first refresh of the page. How can we do that? All the hair moving in different timeline and not stacking after the animation delay. Instead of using animation delay with positive values, you can use negative values. And it means that the first hair get minus 60 milliseconds, the second one minus 120 milliseconds, and so on and so on. And negative animation delay, it's acting like the animation start even before the page is loaded. And this is a nice trick to create that every hair is moving in different timeline, and it's creating a more nice effect for this creature. But it wasn't enough for me. I wanted that to feel more alive, and I added 2 animations for the eyes. One for the inner part of the eyes, and the second one, I wanted the eyes will get closed every 5 seconds. How can I create that the eye will get closed? I'm using the after pseudo element. of both of the eyes. The after pseudo element is like a box with a width of 100% and height of 0 pixel and background color black. But in every 5 seconds, in the last half second, it's getting a height of 100%. And this way, every 4.5 seconds, it's getting close the eyes. And it's a very nice trick to create CSS creature. But let's continue to the more interesting parts. How the game is really working. Before we start to create all those features of the game, let's understand what are game frames. In the game, we have 4 frames, and we need to see them to understand them. The first frame that we see here is the main navigation frame, where we can use the navigation bar. The second frame is when I will press the autoplay pop-up. It will open the first pop-up. This is another frame. And yes, frame can be on another frames, up on another frames. The third frame is the who am I pop-up. Again, this is the third frame that's going up on the main navigation frame. The last frame of the game is when I will click the Save the World button, the main navigation frame will disappear, and instead we will see the game frame itself. As you can see here, this is our last 4 frame of the game. And now we need to create for it the HTML. How the HTML is looking, separated section of HTML element. It can be any HTML element that you want, but I prefer to use the section HTML element. And as you can see, the first frame is the game menu frame. The second frame is the game frame itself. The third frame is the who am I pop-up frame. And the last frame is the autoplay frame pop-up. And this is all our 4 frame. But when we are loading the game, we just want to see the game menu frame. How can we hide all the other frame? Very easy, we just give them display none. And this way I'm seeing when I'm loading the page, only the game menu frame. But now I want to create the logic to tell what frame is open and what frame are hide or closed. How can we do it with HTML? We need some flags. I'm using for it the input HTML element with a type of checkbox. Every one of them get a specific ID. For example, the first input is with ID of toggle game. And if it's unchecked, it's meaning that I want to see the game menu frame and don't want to see the game frame. And if it's checked, it means that I don't want to see the game menu frame and I want to see the game frame. For the other 2 inputs of the pop-up, for example, the autoplay pop-up, if it's unchecked, I don't want to see the autoplay pop-up. And if it's checked, of course, I want to see the pop-up. For the OMI pop-up, the same idea. If it's unchecked, I don't want to see the OMI pop-up. And if it's checked, I want to see the pop-up. But this input, I need to trigger them. And we need a kind of logic that tells them to get checked on or unchecked. And here is some of the tricks beginning to happening. All the buttons in the main navigation that you saw are not HTML buttons, they are label HTML element. And label HTML element can trigger input. How can they trigger? For example, the Save the World button, that it's not a button, it's a label HTML element. It's a label with a 4 attribute that have here the name toggle game. This toggle game is connected to this input with ID of toggle game. It's meaning that when I will press this button, this input will get to be checked. And if I will press it again, it will get unchecked. Again, checked. And as many times that you press it, it's changing from check to uncheck. The same way for the 2 other buttons of the autoplay and the OMI. If I will click, for example, the autoplay button, it will trigger the input with idea of how to play pop-up and it will get checked. And if I will click it again, it will get unchecked. But this is just checking and unchecking those checkboxes. And now we need to give it a CSS style that will show or hide the other frame that we have in the game. And this is one of the most important tricks to create it. We can use the check pseudo element that we have in CSS. And this way I can select the specific input of checkbox and tell it if you are checked, go to any sibling element that you want and put it with display block, display none, or any logic of CSS that you want. And this is exactly what I'm doing in the game. For example, if I will click the autoplay button, the checkbox with the ID of autoplay pop-up will get checked. And if it's checked, go to the sibling element with the ID of autoplay and put it with display block. The same idea for the OMI button. If I press the OMI button, the checkbox with the ID of OMI pop-up will get checked. And if it's checked, go to the sibling element of OMI and put it with display block. But wait a minute, how I'm closing those pop-up? Those buttons that you see in the pop-up, the X button and the close button, again, are not buttons. They are the label HTML element. And for this pop-up, for example, these both buttons are labeled with a for attribute with the value of the ID of the how to play pop-up. And it means that when I will click this, it will uncheck the checkbox input. And this will stop to work because this input will be unchecked, and the display block will vanish, and the display none that we saw before will get back. But there is another question that we need to ask ourselves. When I'm pressing the Save the World button, I'm not doing one operation, I'm doing two operations. When I'm clicking the Save the World button, that is the play button of the game, I'm first hiding the main navigation and then showing the game itself. How can we do two operations instead of one? And it's really the same trick. If the input checkbox with the idea of toggle game is checked, I can tell him to do as many operations that I want. First, go to the game menu frame and put it with display none. Then go to the game frame and put it with display block, and you can put here as many operations that you like. And it's a really nice trick to do in CSS. This written is we written with a SAS preprocessor, but of course you can write it only with CSS with two separated selectors. But now let's go for the one of the most amazing tricks that we have in CSS games, pure CSS game. When I'm clicking the coronavirus creature, they are being disappear and the score is going up. How can we do it in CSS? Of course, I'm using the CSS counters. But before we'll talk about the CSS counters, let's understand the logic of every coronavirus creature that we have in the game. Sorry. As I told you in the beginning of the talk, every coronavirus creature is wrapped with a label HTML element. And inside, we have an input type of radio. And all the style of the coronavirus creature, the body, the eyes, the hairs, are inside this div with the class of body. And because everything is wrapped with a label, and because we have an input inside of it, it doesn't matter which place I'm clicking the coronavirus creature in the game. Because it's wrapped with a label, this input will trigger automatically. It means that when I'm pressing any coronavirus creature, the input with the type of radio will get automatically to be in a checked status. And now I want to hide all those coronavirus that have an input type radio that is checked. How I'm doing it? I'm creating a CSS selector that if this input type of radio is checked, go to the sibling element for the div with class of body and put it with opacity of 0. And this way, the coronavirus creature are being dead in the game, because when I click this coronavirus creature, this input type of radio is being checked. And if it's checked, I'm going to the sibling element with the class of body and just put it with opacity of 0. But now I want to count all those dead viruses in the game. How I'm doing it? I need to create a CSS counter. The CSS counter need to be declared before all those input type radio in the game. I just declare it on the body HTML element. How you declare a CSS counter? On the body selector, I'm just creating the property, the counter reset. You can give it any name that you want. I gave it the name Corona. I now want to count all those input radio that are checked. I'm creating this selector, input type radio, checked, and the counter increment, the same value that we created here, and this will count us all those input type radio that are checked in the game. And now you want to print the score to the screen. I created here a div with class of summarize, sum, and I'm using the after pseudo element with the property of content. The property of content can get the CSS counter function. And the CSS counter function get the corona value that we increment here and created here. And this is always listening and always printing to the screen the total score. Because it's very complicated example, let's see a live demo for it. Here I created 5 coronavirus creature with a lot less parts, only the body of the coronavirus. And you can even see the input type radio that is inside the coronavirus creature. And create a place for summarize the score, div class sum, and you can see here the total score. First, I'm creating the CSS counter on the body HTML element, counter reset with the corona value I'm declaring here. In the input type of radio, if you are check, counter increment the corona value, and then go to the sibling element of body class of the coronavirus, this one, and put it with opacity of 0, because that when I will click this coronavirus creature, they will be disappear. And to summarize the score to the screen, div class sum, after pseudo element, we have the property of content. We're using the counter function and the corona value that we increment here and created here. Let's see that it's really working. I will click this and you will see that the coronavirus creature is disappearing, and you can see that the input radio is getting checked. In the real game, all those input are with opacity of 0, and it doesn't matter which place, and this, the score will go up. And this is one of the most amazing important tricks to create really pure CSS game. But let's continue to the next trick. CSS Countdown. Really to create in pure CSS? How I'm doing it? As you can see in this code pen, we have a number that's going between 99 to 0, and the HTML is empty. Here we have the, the value of numbers. If I will put here a number 1, you will see that it will get in the middle, because I'm using here the before and the after pseudo element. Okay, and as you can see, we have the before and after pseudo element, and every one of them have an animation. What is the animation? The animation is called the countdown animation. Why? Fix it. It will work for us. Yes. We have here the countdown animation, the keyframe of the countdown animation that create animation on the content property that going between 9 to 0. But how the number is going between 99 to 0? I'm using the animation for the 2 pseudo element, one for the before pseudo element and one for the after pseudo element. I'm using the same animation, but in a different way. For the before pseudo element, I'm using the animation of countdown for 100 seconds and only one iteration. And this means that every 10 seconds is going between 9, and after 10 seconds to 8, and after another 10 seconds to 7, and so on, until it's going to the 0 value, and then it's stuck on the 0 value because it's only one iteration, and we have here the forward key value. For the second number, the after pseudo element, I'm using the same animation, but now for 10 seconds and 10 iteration. And it means that it starts in 9, every second is going 1 down, and another 1 down, and so on, until it's getting to the 0 value. And then it do it again, because I have a total iteration of 10 times. And this way it's doing it again and again and again. And it will, in the end, it will stuck on the 0, 0 value, because like I told you before, we have here the forward keyword that tell the browser to stuck in the last frame of the animation. And it's really amazing trick to create a pure CSS countdown. And these both number working very separated, they are very synchronized only because the animation is very synchronized. And it's a very nice trick to create the CSS countdown in pure CSS. And let's talk about how to create random values in CSS and why we need random values in CSS. Let's see it in the game. I will refresh the screen because it's one of the most amazing tricks here. And when I'm starting to play the game, all the location of the viruses and even the size of the viruses are randomized values. Every virus have in 6 points of the game different location from top to bottom. And it's very nice to see if we can create random values with pure CSS. And the truth is we can't create random values with pure CSS, but we can create it with the SAS. Because in SAS, we have random function. Because it's very important example, I want you to see it in the real life code. Okay, I will. As you can see, I have here a keyframe for every coronavirus. It means that I have 100 different keyframes. And because of that, I don't want to copy paste all this keyframe. I'm using here, like I told you in the beginning, I'm using here the for loop of SAS. This way I'm creating 100 different keyframes for every one of the viruses. And every virus has 6 points in the game that the translate Y of the transform property is getting a different value. And you don't want to create it and to write it by hand. You're using here the random function that we have in SAS that give us a number between 1 to 80 and double it with 1 VH. And this way, the values are being randomized between 1 to 80 VH. And of course, I'm using here for the scale random values and even for the rotation random values. And for you to believe me that there is such things as random values in the SAS preprocessor, let's see it in a live example. As you can see in the HTML, we have 6 li HTML elements. And I'm using here the for loop and printing the number with the before pseudo element with the property of content. And here in the string, I'm just creating a number that's going between 1 to 80 VH. And all these values are randomized. You don't believe me? Let's check it out if I press enter in the SAS, and you will see that the number are being changed. If I press it again, the number are being changed. And it's an amazing thing to create something that is more dynamically in a pure CSS game. Okay, let's continue to our last CSS trick. In the end of the game, I have a game over curtain that you didn't saw because we didn't wait 100 seconds. And how I know when exactly to put this game over curtain in the real game, how I know to put it in exactly after 100 seconds. And it's really an easy trick to create the game over curtain. In CSS, as you may know, you can give the animation duration, for example, 0.6 seconds. But I want that animation will load, for example, after 100 seconds. Or for this example, we just want to create it, for example, after exactly 5 seconds. How can I put the animation that will start after 5 seconds, for example? I can use the animation delay, and I can give it any amount of time. In the real game, it's 100 seconds, but for this example, it's just 5 seconds. For you to believe me that it's so easy, we'll refresh the screen and we'll count until 5 seconds. Refresh it, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Game over. Really easy trick to create the game over curtain in pure CSS game. And we talk about it, we talk about a lot of CSS tricks to create a pure CSS game. And you may ask yourself if this is the most important thing from this talk, to create a pure CSS game. And it isn't. I think the most important thing to take from this talk is to create whatever project that you like. It means that we forgot that when we are children and we are playing, this is the best way for our brain to learn new stuff, by playing, because we're enjoying. When we're enjoying, we don't care if it's hard or easy. We're so enjoying to play, and we solve all the problems when we are playing. And when we are adults, we forget that this is the best way to learn. And we always learn from books, and not always all the time we are enjoying to learn all this new stuff. And that I want you that you will take from this talk, create your own project, play with your own code. You will be, at the end, you will create your own project that you like very much, and you will learn a lot of new stuff, and you will more like to love your own job that you're doing. And in the end, you will get better salary because you are getting to be a lot better web developer. Then create any project that you like, pure CSS game, other stuff, anything that will create you to enjoy to create your own project. And if you want to know about how I created this game, I will retweet both articles that I wrote about this pure CSS game in my own Twitter account. You can follow me via my Twitter account. I publish a lot of stuff I'm creating on CSS. And you can see all my other articles in this link at medium.com, and you can see all my other talks in my own website. And my friends, thank you very much for listening.
All right, cool. That was an awesome talk, Elad. Thank you so much. Like, it's absolutely like mind-bending how you can do all that stuff with CSS. Like, I've created games before, but I'll always use JavaScript for my game logic. So maybe I need to challenge myself a bit more.
Yeah, but
So,
but maybe more important, isn't the best way to create real games. It's just for the fun. Yeah, it's,
sure, but it's nonetheless super impressive you can do that with just CSS. So we do have one question for you, actually. So this is from Steve, and Steve asks, have you experienced any performance impacts when you have a lot of selectors or animations in your CSS? And
yeah.
is there a limit to how complex you can make a CSS-only game?
It's a very good question. Yes, I saw a lot of problem in the beginning. Sometimes I'm using the position absolute and it does me a lot of problem with animation, and I just created them with transform. And still, in Android device, I have a lot of problem with charity. I have a lot of problem with animation on Android device, and in the navigation menu, I added a button that if you click it, you can go from high performance to low performance. And what the button is doing is remove the animation of the eyes and the moving of the creatures of all the hairs. And this way it's working on Android devices that are low performance in a better way. Yes, of course, it's very hard to do 100 animation in the game that are always moving. Yeah.
Nice. It's really cool how you adapted it to low performance devices. That's really cool. All right, I think that's it. So Elad, again, thank you so much. We will have a 10-minute break now, after which we will have Daniele's talk on the philosophy of open source, so from open source to open mind. So go and grab a drink, or take a break from your screen, and we'll meet back here at 7:15.
Great. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you so much. Awesome talk.